Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Today we'll be breaking down the latest patch 12.8. It's a rather small patch, so don't expect huge swings in the meta. The main reason they're keeping the changes light is to not mess up the current balance too much, especially since a lot of high-ranked players are still practicing for the upcoming Worlds Tournament. But there are still plenty of adjustments to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT shows and tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. With no system changes this week, we can dive right in to the augment changes. There are only two augment adjustments to talk about, the first being a buff to Quickest Silver. This is a Radiant item that players can get either from the Radiant Relics augment or has a chance to drop from the Golden Egg after it hatches. Whichever way you come by it, the attack speed buff is going up to 55% from 45%. 10% increase is quite substantial for anything attack speed related, but in the grand scheme of things, this change won't be all that noticeable. First off, the chances of even getting one of the two augments for Quickest Silver to be playable is already low, and then it also needs to be one of the Radiant options. But hey, the buff is a buff, so we can't turn our nose up too much at this change. And honestly, 10% more attack speed is actually impactful, so keep an eye out for the new and improved Quickest Silver in your games. The other augment change is to one specific portable forge item, Eternal Winter. In an effort to make the rules of similar archetypes to be more consistent, they're bumping the attack speed slow effect of Eternal Winter up to 30% from 25%. Consistency is always a good thing, though 30% is quite a lot for Eternal Winter, as it was quite good at 25% already. We'll talk about this later on in the patch notes, but it's a tight line to balance when it comes to negative debuff effects like attack speed slow. The higher it is, the less fun it feels to play against, but the lower it is, the more useless it becomes. These types of all-or-nothing debuffs should be heavily scrutinized by all fans of TFT because it will lead to a better all-around game in the future. That's it for augments. Time now to shift over to trait changes. First up is Chemtech. Chemtech has gone through the ringer in terms of nerfs and buffs throughout the mid-set. When they toned down the damage reduction side of the vertical Chemtech, it left a lot to be desired for their late-game scaling. To help with that, they are buffing the health regen to 4, 8, 13, 20% from 4, 7, 10, 18%. It's not a huge buff by any means, but it does align with their goal of adding a touch of survivability to vertical Chemtech boards. Will this have much of an impact on the meta? Not likely, since the main Chemtech board is Renata, that focuses more on Bruiser than Chemtech. There's always a chance that any Chemtech buff means a return to glory for Warwick, but such a minor buff isn't likely to catapult him into spotlight again, at least we hope not. While Enchanter is one of the most common splash traits in the game, it's just that, a splash trait. That implies most boards are only utilizing 2, maybe 3 enchanters at most. In an effort to make adding additional enchanters more appealing, they're increasing the bonus healing and shielding to 25, 50, 80, 115% from 25, 45, 70, 100%. The question is then, does Enchanter need to be overtly strong the more you invest into it? Making it more effective is sensible, but honestly, Enchanter is perfectly fine as a 2 or 3 splash trait. At the end of the day, these buffs are only aimed at healing and shielding, so it's unlikely to matter unless we see the return of Morgana Senna Enchanter boards. It wouldn't be a mid-set patch without some type of adjustment to Hextech. That's right, they're buffing the Hextech shields up to 100, 150, 275, 375 from 100, 135, 250, 350. Rather small number increases, but every time they tweak anything Sivir related, she ends up being the dominant carry in the meta. And again, even when they don't mess with Sivir in any way, she ends up being the dominant carry. So maybe at this point, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. In any case, Hextech buffs are scary because of Sivir, but the synergy did need some love because it has been borderline useless since the nerfs in previous patches. Syndicate, more like Syndicate, can't play this trait because it's booty. At least they recognize that Syndicate is struggling, as they are buffing the bonus defensive stats to 55 from 50, the bonus amplification for 7 Syndicates to 55% from 50%. Will it make a difference? It's hard to say because at the end of the day, Ahri is the only real carry for the synergy unless Ashe makes a comeback. Ahri's been in a weird spot in recent times because she's just not the most reliable of carries and it takes time to scale. Syndicate can certainly help with that because of the extra survivability, but that may not matter if Ahri doesn't do enough damage or misses her orbs. Overall, these are necessary buffs for an underperforming synergy, but the actual impact they have on the meta is hard to say, with it most likely not mattering all that much. Let's end this section with the 2 big synergy changes, starting with Scrap. We are surprised to see Striker not receiving changes, but Scrap at least makes sense. It's paired with Striker a lot of the time because of Aurelia, and it has a lot of presence in the late game compositions because of Echo and Jinx. That said, the shield amount is only going down to 20, 30, 50 from 20, 40, 60. This is per component, so a reduction of 10 is more impactful than it sounds, but is it enough? Without also changing Striker, it's unlikely to see these nerfs to Scrap drastically reduce how effective a Scrap Striker late game board is. As usual, we'll have to see how it plays out, but our prediction is players can keep spamming Sivir and they'll do just fine. And the final trait change is a nerf to 2 mutant mutations. Cybernetic Enhancements is going to 450, 800, 1250 bonus health from 450, 900, 1350. Cybernetic is certainly a useful mutation for Kha'Zix, but it isn't by any means overpowered, so toning down the bonus health should help bring it down to a more average balance of the other mutations. It will still be plenty strong early game where the bonus health plays a larger role. The more impactful mutation is to Voracious Appetite. Scaling is going down to 18, 25, 35 bonus attack damage and AP from 20, 30, 40. The numbers may look small, but it does add up to be an overall decent nerf to an overperforming mutation. The fact half the lobby would contest Voracious in the games it was present made it clear that they had to do something to the mutation, and nerfing the stat gain is the way to do that. At the end of the day, Mutant is still an alright spot, but they do need to be careful with too many nerfs, otherwise it will fall back into a niche synergy we barely ever see played. Alright, time for champion changes. I mentioned Ashe earlier with Syndicate changes, and maybe we'll be seeing more of Ashe in the meta as they're buffing her volley slow to 20% from 15%. Let's be honest, a minor buff to the slow debuff isn't going to help Ashe carry better. Useful, yes, but a better carry? Nah. Time flies when you're having fun with Zilean. Like Ashe and other attack speed slow debuffs, they are adjusting Zilean as well with a 5% buff at tier 1 and 2. Barely even worth mentioning, but hey, a buff is always welcome on a fan favorite champion like Zilean. All this talk about attack speed slows, it should come as no surprise that Echo is also having his ability adjusted. The debuff is reduced by 5% at every tier, and while on Zilean a 5% isn't too noticeable, on Echo it definitely is. This is because Echo's ability is an AoE, meaning he'll be much less effective than before. Of course, Echo is still going to be strong. After all, an AoE slowing debuff is nothing to scoff at, but there is another nerf in the future for Echo, and we don't need to be time travelers to know what that change is. Players love making gold early game, and Gangplank is one of the most satisfying early game units for that. But is he too good at generating extra gold? The devs seem to think so because they're lowering his ability damage by 10 at tier 1. In general, this won't make much of a difference, but it does make early game mercenaries a tad bit weaker. Slightly weaker means, on average, slightly more damage taken, which leads to either being forced to cash out earlier or dying faster than expected. There's a lot of extrapolating from just 10 damage reduction, but the point is, even seemingly minor nudges to mercenaries can potentially affect how viable it is in the meta. It's something to keep in mind during your games. Not only are they nerfing Mutant, but they're also nerfing Kha'Zix. For any anti-assassin fans, this is probably a welcoming thing to hear. The nerf started the attack damage scaling of his ability as it's going down to 180, 185% from 195, 200%. There is a buff at level 3, but level 3 buffs are rarely relevant. At level 1 and 2, these are fairly dramatic reductions for Kha'Zix and may put him back on the joke champion list. That said, it's always healthier for assassins to be on the weaker side than too strong just because of how unfun they are to play against. And Kha'Zix lives and dies by the mutation of the game more so than anything, so don't completely count him out of the meta just yet. Whoa, 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 whoa. Renata Glass buffs? In this economy? Yep, though they are mainly just adjusting her attack speed slow debuff to be in line with everything else, as it's going up to 20% from 15%, much like we've seen with other champions. They've also buffed her damage at tier 3 by a bit, but again, like we mentioned with Kha'Zix, 3-star buffs to a 4-cost unit don't usually make much of a difference since it happens so rarely. Buffing Renata may seem odd, but don't worry, they aren't anything substantial. The last champion to talk about is Jinx. Keep in mind that Jinx is already taking a small hit in value with the Scrap nerfs, especially since she's often the reason Scrap gets played in the late game. In addition to those changes, her rocket form attack damage scaling is going down to 210, 220% from 220, 230%. Like a lot of the changes today, these numbers aren't massive. Jinx should still be plenty strong, though her overall scaling is definitely affected when you put together everything being changed in this patch. And the final section for today's patch notes is item changes, or specifically one item change, which is the Frozen Heart. Remember all the changes they've made to the attack speed slows this patch? Well, all of them are due to Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart has been too good this set, primarily because of Echo, but in general, the idea of applying an AoE attack speed slow to nearby enemies is kind of broken, isn't it? At least champions with that effect as an ability have to cast it first. Frozen Heart is just always on unless the enemy completely nullifies it with something like Quicksilver. Point is that even though they're nerfing the slowdown to 30% from 35%, Frozen Heart at its core is a troublesome item. It's too all or nothing and relies heavily on the assassin trait. Nerfing it is definitely a good thing, but ultimately they may want to consider even having this type of item in future sets. That's all for today, folks. As we said in the introduction, this is not a large patch, so expect to see a lot of the meta remain the same. Yes, that means more Sivir. Looking on the bright side, once the Worlds Tournament is over, the patches should become a lot more interesting as we're beginning to approach the end of Set 6. Let us know in the comment section below what change you're the happiest with from 12.8. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.